when they burn through the process, I don't know what I'm going to be, right? It's like the aspirational,
Right.
like a transformative experience that Paul talks about, right?
Exactly.
I don't know what I'm going to be in the fumes that are emitted by the burning of those ideas and beliefs.
I'm joined again with the usual suspects, and so here with Taylor Barratt, Guy Sengstock, and Christopher Mastropietro. And what we want to do is we want to draw things together and put them into a really Socratic mode. And what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to, not in the same detail we did in 10a and 10b, but we're going to get into dialectic, into dialogos. And the virtue that we're going to be doing this about is dialectic itself. So we're doing this interesting Socratic thing of applying the very practice to trying to more deeply examine and understand, potentially reform that practice. So what's going to happen is we'll do just a brief dipping into some of the preliminary practices that go into the preparation for dialectic into dialogos, and then we'll go into that. So, welcome everyone. So we will begin first just doing a basic mindfulness practice. Perhaps think about going through the 3 centerings: centering the body, centering attention, centering your attitude. We'll do that for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And then I'll say we're going to shift to the Neoplatonic contemplation. And I'll just give you, I won't do the detailed explanations. I'll just give us the benchmarks. And then we'll turn things over to Guy, who will take us through a few of the exercises drawn from the circling tradition. And then Chris is going to give us a quick overview of the basic stages, just a reminder for what's going on in the dialect, what goes on in dialectic and the dialogos, and then we'll undertake it. All right. So let's begin by centering. Remember to do the 3 centerings. We're going to move now from the meditation to the contemplation practice. Come into an awareness of all of your senses, not so much the content, but the how. Sense of contact, receptivity, reciprocal opening. Now into awareness of awareness. Within and without. reciprocal opening of phusis. Suke. Noesis. Now how all three interpenetrate and the one-oneing of henosis. Kenosis. Theosis. Slowly come out of this practice, trying as best you can to integrate what you cultivated in this practice with your everyday consciousness, cognition, character, and communitas.
Start eyes closed, just one round. I'll go first and we'll move to my left. Just bringing that awareness into the body, into internal emotion, thoughts, experience mostly within your skin, and then come to terms with them through the sentence stem. What I'm noticing right now is a warm hum, sensing a warm hum from my toes pretty evenly all the way up to my face. I'm noticing feeling the movement of my arms, the vibration of my voice in my chest and my face, and the space of the mind, like a warm clarity.
Saying right. Pressure against my lower belly. Quality of contact with my chair. The dryness of the air through my nostrils. And how still my body is.
What I'm noticing now is a difference between the left and right side of my body, especially lower. Some tension and pain on the left side. much more relaxed, right? But nevertheless, a sense of stilling towards the center, a sense of opening to the horizon, sense of slowing down, more receptivity. And a longing.
What I'm noticing right now is a chill around the outside, my extremities, and a leaden feeling, heaviness, running up and down arms and legs, but at the center a warmth and a lightness and an upward movement, even as everything else seems to be pulling down.
And then as we stay with that cultivation of awareness that we've just called forth in presence, I want you just to everyone to be really conscious as you slowly open your eyes to continue to allow that sense of presence to stay really close to you as you come into relationship with your visual field. And then without necessarily looking at anybody, just becoming aware of the human beings next to you. And then just take a moment, just begin to just look to the left and to the right. And just get present to the thou. And then so what we'll do this time is the instructions are say something you're noticing with, in this case, Chris, and then come back and reveal yourself. So it'd be, Chris, I'm noticing, and now I'm experiencing, or now I'm feeling, right? So I'll go with you first. Oh man, Chris, the moment I just got just present with you right there, I just felt like a movement of love in my heart that feels like it's growing, and lots of affinity and a growing. I'm noticing you occur to me as somebody more and more in my future. And I feel gratitude and comfort and something like family.
Mm.
Being with you, I'm noticing, I notice the in the stillness in your eyes, and what strikes me is a tenacity and an unquenchable hunger for whatever this is, and a deliberateness about confronting it, being with it, knowing it, and seeing that or noticing that being with you, I feel like a sense of brotherhood and a kinship and a deep respect for you. John, being with you, I notice this very similar sense of warmth and a feeling of just more of a visceral familiarity with you and a connection of belonging and closeness with you that feels like from this trip in particular, and I feel grateful for a growing friendship. Feel a lot of love for you. Yeah, and saying I just did that, but just saying that or seeing that, I feel at home with you.
Being with you, I notice like this river, like a raging underneath my stillness that wants to like break through and like play with you. Yeah, it's like a curiosity and like an excitement. Having said that, I notice like a bit of a bracing, like a nervousness or an anxiousness. How's that land for Chris? Yeah. Mm. Mm. Being with you, I notice like the energy shift more up into my chest. I notice an opening in my chest. Comfort or some flavor of safety, relaxation. Yeah. Yeah, having said that now, I notice could like melt a little bit more into this chair. I'm aware of like this energy for me, like building and emanating in my chest. Just feel this gratitude. Yeah, and there's like a happiness. It's like for what you do and for who you are. Yeah, and it's like it's almost like this kind of nervous, like fluttery sort of energy. Yeah. Having said that, notice I feel like a little shy, like a bit young. Yeah, and touched in some way.
Being with you, Chris, I'm always amazed by, I feel like just suddenly and effortlessly I go to the depths. And there's a kind of joyful playfulness there. And an enjoyment of that. And having said that, I can feel this bubbling cheerfulness in me, and a longing to see more. I feel like often with you I'm listening like to music, and I love it. Really love it. Hi, being with you. I'm noticing you calling a stillness out in me that seems different this time than before. And I feel a kind of deepening of resonance because of that. And having said that, I'm appreciating the wisdom of you in a really sort of felt sense. It hasn't been as forefront for me as before. Dealing with you, Taylor, I immediately, I get this sort of, I feel excited. I feel a kind of what's going to happen. And I feel this sense of security in that, which I don't always have with people. That it's safe to do that with you. And I like the way it goes. And having said that, I'm feeling a bit of regret right now because you're not quite as much in my life as I would like. And I'm just not, I hadn't realized that until just now.
Being with you, Guy, I just feel absolute sense of brotherhood, family, and kind of ease and comfort that comes with many, many, many years, and yet in this case came without, and seemed not to need it. And having said that, I'm realizing how much clearer that has become just in these last few days, even though it didn't seem to need to be any clearer before. Being with you, Taylor, I feel this kind of giddy playfulness. There's like something awry, some expectancy. I have this sense of having had 100 conversations and having forgotten them all, and looking forward to having them again so that we can remember what they contained. And having said that, I'm sensing that maybe it's mutual enough for that to be a real possibility. And I find myself looking forward to it. Being with you, my friend, I just feel like home. And no need to say anything else. And having said that, I'm grateful that at this point, there really is no need to say anything else.
Why don't we now move you just giving a brief overview of the steps, stages, and the roles of dialectic into dialogos.
So for a fuller account of these episodes 10A and B of the series, specifically 10B, contains a pretty lengthy set of instructions, not only the instructions about the process, but also sort of a foregrounding context of what it's doing and what are the moves that are being made in each of the steps. So I would just refer people to that. Much more comprehensive. This is just a quick overview. There are 4 roles and 4 steps. The roles are the proposer, in this case John, the the listener, in this case Taylor, the scribe, in this case Guy, the herald, in this case myself, to begin with, and then it's going to rotate every turn. We're going to start with a proposal. That proposal is going to build as it moves from person to person. We're going to stay on the same virtue, in this case dialectic. We're not going to change up the virtue as we move from person to person. The idea is that it gathers together, each person takes what's been given, uses it, reformulates it, builds on it, and moves it forward, right? Compounding exercise. So the first stage is called amplification. The proposer makes a proposal to the listener. The listener will try to educe the proposal, to draw it out, ask questions, make inquiries, try and help the proposer to draw it out. And they're really going to be working together on that. And that's just both with the questions and the propositions, but also with gesture, all kinds of nonverbal cues. Everything we have at our disposal is used in that process to draw that proposal out. That's the amplification. Then we have the appreciation. The appreciation is basically the listener having taken everything in, having helped to stretch and draw and knead the proposal, and will then appreciate it in both senses of the term appreciation, to really acknowledge what is novel or interesting or insightful or striking about what they've just heard, but also to appreciate it in the sense of maybe to graduate it a little bit, maybe to lift it, maybe to add in reformulating it or in paraphrasing it and being more idiosyncratic about their formulation of it. Maybe something will be added that actually wasn't there in the first instant, so it's being appreciated. The third, which can really occur at any time, is aporia. Aporia being a moment in the process where maybe we're at an impasse, something is trying to be said that can't really be said, maybe there's a miscommunication, maybe we're not quite getting it, or maybe we've actually reached a point where there's been a great insight or something very striking, we actually just need to stop and pause on it, take it in, dwell on it for a moment, and let it sit in the margins. That can come at any time. And then the fourth stage is the anticipation. The anticipation comes when the listener, having done the amplification, having done the appreciation, then calls into question what's been proposed. Maybe there are ways in which it's not exactly right. Maybe there's more to the story. Maybe it's not sufficient, and it won't be. So there will always be something to anticipate about it. What hasn't been said that should be? What missing ingredient will help us advance the story and keep it moving? Okay. Now the roles of the scribe and the herald. The scribe is keeping track of the proposal. As it gets reformulated, the scribe is noting it, writing it down. In this case, we have a pad and paper. You can also do it from memory, it depends. But the scribe is basically keeping track of the letter of the proposal, right? Not every single word that's said, but every time as the proposal is reformulated, the scribe is keeping track, because the rest of us are bound to forget at some point in time. Before the listener moves into appreciation, after they've finished amplifying and drawing out the proposal, the scribe will chime in and reiterate what the proposal has been, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're actually appreciating the same thing, just so that we're all coherent together. And then the herald is doing something similar to the scribe, except for everything that is not said, right? This herald is noticing what's actually happening between the two people, between the listener and the proposer. What kind of relationship is actually being called into effect, right? What's passing back and forth between them in all of the things that aren't being said, right? How is the virtue that is being educed and called into question, what effect is that actually having on the two people and their relationship in the moment? And then how is that progressing as we go along? That's the herald. So the herald and the scribe are basically kind of picking up on two different aspects of what's going on, but they're just looking through very different kinds of telescopes.
And they both speak to the listener after appreciation and before anticipation.
After appreciation, before anticipation. And so then the roles switch, right? The listener becomes the proposer, the scribe becomes the listener, the herald becomes the scribe, and the proposer becomes the herald.
Right. And we'll do one round of that, and then we'll go into some free form.
Okay, proposer.
I propose that the virtue of dialectic is the cultivated capacity to orient and to track what in dialogos is beyond what is normally found in dialogue. That's a virtue that helps us track that in dialogos which exceeds everyday dialogue. So the following kinds of things.
Just real quick at this, Dudley, summarize. I just want to
Yep.
make sure I got all that.
Yes.
The virtue of the dialectic is the
Capacity.
the capacity,
right, to orient and track that which in dialogos exceeds the everyday sense of dialogue. And in that sense, to be oriented on to the logos, orienting and tracking it, following it. So specifically, I think we're talking about things like that. Unlike in dialogue and dialogos, there's a reciprocal and shared flow state. Within that, there's an intent to presence, a we presence, above and beyond a you and I presence. There's a sense of moving beyond what's in normal dialogue of my autobiography and your autobiography and what's negotiated between them into something beyond both of us. That there's an orientation on the how and the making sense, not just the what that is the focal point of the dialogue. And that there is the proper aspiration to actually exemplify and thereby begin to cultivate a particular virtue. And none of these are typically present in what is meant by everyday dialogue. And all of that constellation, the virtue of dialectic is the capacity we create through the practice that allows us to say, there it is, properly orient towards it so that we can navigate and track it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the it being the logos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've tried it, and I'm not giving a definition of the logos. I'm giving some criteria by which we can mark its presence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because defining of it would be actually to undermine it. But
yeah. So I mean, I think you sort of simply said it at the beginning. It's sort of this function of tracking the logos that is the defining feature, is what I'm hearing, of dialectic,
right,
that is not present in everyday dialogue.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to say that there are many different ways among many dimensions in which we're modifying how we're orienting,
Mm-hmm.
how we're taking up our own identities,
Mm-hmm.
what we're trying to achieve, and an emphasis on the how of making sense as opposed to the sense being made.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's this constellation that I'm trying to get at,
Mm-hmm.
and
these are all features.
These are all features. Mm-hmm. And so, because what I want to say is that the proper virtue of dialectic is to orient and track the logos so that you can appropriately follow it and afford how it will unfold for itself.
For itself.
Yes.
Can you say that another way?
I want the virtue makes me desirous that the logos take on a life of its own, such that it can challenge me to go to places that are not comfortable. And so that I often need to instantiate the very virtue that's in the practice in order to follow the logos. And again, this is a very deep difference from dialogue, in which we typically, even when we're disagreeing, we are in autobiographical positions of comfort, and we're trying to make a point or convict somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like another defining feature too, is sort of, we're not trying to convince like we would in normal everyday dialogue.
Oh, right. Very good. Yes. There can be argumentation, but the virtue is not the attempt to convince, but to coordinate what is emerging from you and I such that we can both orient onto the logos and how it is helping us engage with the virtue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
So I have one other dimension too.
Oh.
Well, and this is because I think dialectic is a virtue of virtues.
Mm-hmm.
That what it is dialectic is also the virtue that allows us to come into communion with the logos, such that it can guide us about how we can understand, cultivate, and internalize particular virtues and how they are related together.
Yes. And that how they're related together, you also see in the dialectic.
Yes. I think dialectic, insofar as the dialectic is the incarnating the presence of the logos, as I've described it, the way it exceeds dialogue, the logos, right, is I'm trying to say something. It's disclosing to us not just any individual virtue, but how the virtues all interpenetrate, almost like in a holographic manner.
It's almost like the logos of the virtue, and then the logos of the, what we call it, the many.
Yes. That's good. I like that. And so I'm now cognizant of the fact that this is kind of a backwards proposal. I was going to say definition, it's not definition. Backwards proposal, because what I've done is saying what it is the virtue affords us to do, but I haven't spoken towards what the virtue, like what the phenomenology of the virtue is, what it's like to inhabit that. So in addition to that, the ability to orient and track all the dimensionality of the logos that is above and beyond everyday dialogue, there's something about the virtue that is a way in which I come into question myself, and I'm being examined. It's a self-examination in which I'm being examined by the logos, and not just autobiographical. Yes,
It's like reciprocal.
Yes.
Yeah. Like that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think my proposal's done.
Would you like me to read the initial proposal and see if that still fits?
Yes.
Okay. The virtue of dialectic is the capacity to orient and teach that track that in dialogos that exceeds in everyday dialogue.
Right. And what I would add to that is just some of the dimensions that have been drawn out, and also not just sort of the teleology of the virtue, what it's aiming at, but also the experience of the virtue is this experience of being examined. It's semi-autonomous. It's not like I'm not involved, but there's a self-examination in which I'm being examined by the logos, and that is part and parcel of being able to participate. That's what.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. Appreciation.
We do appreciate that.
Oh, that's right. The herald.
Yeah.
Right. We need the herald.
There's something quite funny going on here, which is that there's this real sense of seriousness about this one. Sometimes when a proposal is made about a virtue, we can just sort of throw it out and see what happens. And I sense in this case, because of this, the stakes, right? There's a set of stakes on this one that isn't true of the other ones, right? Because we're because we're proposing it, the very thing that we're doing, it weighs very heavily on the proposal. And the volume and girth of the proposal, which I sense Taylor is just trying to cling to, lest it crush us all, has something to do with those stakes and the heaviness of those stakes. And there's a lot of care and a meticulousness, and I could feel the heaviness of it as you're both talking, especially as you're.
That's really good.
Yeah, I appreciate the multifaceted attention that you have on the proposal, of sort of like there's what it is or how it occurs to you, and then there's the sort of the defining features of it, and there's also the phenomenological experience of engaging with that particular virtue. So it feels in so many ways like comprehensive, and it like checks off so many boxes of my understanding as well. So it's just like everything's like yes, 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 yes. Yeah, I think that's where I'm left with it. Yeah. Anticipation. Oh my God. I feel playful. It's like, what's left? Sort of reflecting the girth of the proposal. I am thinking a bit more of, maybe in that area of, and I guess I should be probably anticipating more towards you. I'm thinking there's something maybe still mysterious here about the experience of the engagement in the dialectic and how that would be different. So maybe picking up a bit on John's, more of the reciprocal seeing in perspective. I think that could be expanded upon.
And engagement, you mean the engagement with the people or with the virtue, or?
Well, I think I was thinking more from sort of the individual participation, so sort of the participatory experience of engaging in dialectic. I think there might be more there to explore.
Right.
What else seems mysterious to me? I think I notice more of a gravitation to that area that feels important. So that's probably where my proposals come from.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. So, so picking up on everything that John said, I feel no interest to modify any of it. And I would propose the experience of engaging in dialectic calls upon a vulnerability.
The experience of engaging in dialectic calls upon a vulnerability.
It calls upon other virtues, actually.
Calls about other virtues, actually. Yeah.
I think I'm noticing something about that.
Yeah.
Courage needs to be online. Humility needs to be online.
Yeah.
What do we call it? Like openness. Receptivity. Yeah, it seems like it calls upon so many virtuous foundational capacities to fully engage in the dialectic.
Yeah. So all these capacities, right? You're seeing it calls on all of them to fully engage. So engagement, is it linked to all these capacities, or all these capacities, are they the means of engagement? Are they what call forth the engagement, or?
Well, I think some of them call forth the engagement. I think probably the courage is probably the one virtue that would call on the engagement. And yet to do it, to allow the thing that John's talking about to sort of be examined. The humility probably has to be there, otherwise it's being blocked in some way. Same thing maybe with the openness. So something, whatever, the virtues that make me more receptive, more open, allow me to more fully engage in the process. Whereas if those are less defined or of a lower capacity, they will create maybe bottlenecks in the dialectic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Something about that feels right.
Great. If you just sit with that feeling of right,
Mm.
and if we ask ourselves, are you engaged? Are you in the engagement and that feeling of right? Are those two connected right now?
I like. Yeah. Yeah.
What just happened right there?
It's just something like felt more solid. I don't know why this is the motion, but this is the motion.
Yeah. Well, you looked up there.
Yeah.
And then you went like that, kind of in that direction.
Yeah.
You said something feels more solid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know quite how I would articulate it other than it seems, I mean, I'm silly. What am I doing?
Yeah.
But I'm like trusting.
Yeah.
Like something like landed, like it came in and it landed. Like the answer was yes.
See, so from there, I have a question. What is dialectic?
Well, now I notice I want to bring in John's proposal.
Do you want it read?
No, it's something more like, maybe I'll use slightly different words that fit more with this moment. It's almost like, yes, there's a following, but it's like a trust. Like I'm engaging, like my following isn't like trepidatious or cautious. It isn't even necessarily that full of curiosity. It's almost feels like a calling, almost like a flavor of like a deep trust.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the connection to the right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just noticed that actually part of what has you follow where the logos takes you, right, is a trust.
Yes.
And you said something interesting. It's not even necessarily curiosity. Right? That seems like an insight.
Yeah, something about that seems counter in some way, like, oh, that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And yet something about that feels right.
And if it's there right now, that trust, if I were to just feel the trust, and I'm mostly asking the trust, what is the trust in relationship with? How does it know to be trust?
I like the question. I don't know if I have the answer. I can feel something here in my body, like this is where the sensation is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right here is where the sensation is.
Yeah, something like it came online when you asked the question.
Yeah. And is it like the sensation, is it the sensation letting you know that you trust, or is it telling you to trust?
I think it's something like the relationship, like the question, what's it in relationship to?
Yeah.
It seems to be here.
Right here. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. 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 And there's like a wonder to it. It's like, and I don't know how to make sense of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't seem to be anxious about not knowing how to make sense of it.
No.
How come? Is that
the easy answer? Is that's the trust.
Yeah.
We start getting a little cyclical here.
So where the hermeneutic circle started.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Maybe it is the absence of contraction. It is the recognition of openness, the recognition of okayness.
Yeah.
The idea of rightness.
Yeah.
That all that is, like, I feel relaxed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in this place.
Yes.
It's a yes.
Yes. So I have a question for you. What is dialectic?
Oh, man.
And would you like to hear the current duration of it?
No. And yet, it's interesting. It's like I'm out of words. It's like a more I could repeat myself and that would still feel true, and yet it seems slightly insufficient.
Yeah. What if we just allow that no word and maybe consider it an aporia?
Yeah.
Just give that a moment or a space. I notice being with you in this aporia or this space, this silence, I feel very solid, but I also feel like I'm dissolving at the edges, right? Like we could just dissolve together or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think language exists here. Yeah, it's like that faculty is failing or not working. And yet it doesn't feel like confusion. I mean, I'm more confused about the state.
Yeah.
But not about the idea of there being something to add or a new answer to what is dialectic.
Yeah. Which is?
Yeah. Nothing. I would just go back to trust.
Trust.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Do you feel complete?
I feel like, there's nothing else that I think I can add, especially in this place that I'm in right now.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you feel I understood you? Do you feel understood?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Sweet. Thank you. So I will go into appreciation or does
you do appreciation and then the scribe and the herald.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm appreciation, just the couple of things. John's, as you mentioned, the seriousness of it, right? And the articulation of John. And then this went into a very, almost a nonverbal kind of place that was very simply about trust, which is really interesting to me. And that was also really interesting to me, and I appreciated the contentment was staying there. Like, I could have easily imagined that being an anxious experience or something like that, but it wasn't. And I think there's my appreciation. Yeah.
Okay, so scribe and then herald.
So carrying a little bit over from John, the definition, or the proposal, that we have is that dialectic is a following the logos, but understood as a deep trust of the logos, a trust that calls upon the other virtues as fundamental capacities.
Yeah. Great.
So as herald, I saw and felt this shift. And there was definitely a sort of head to heart shift. And then I also found a slowing down of how things were unpacking. And so there was more of the articulation by putting space between things. That was really, really present. That's what I saw as the herald.
Great. Can you read that one more? Oh, or whoever the scribe is. I just want that read to me one more time.
So the proposal is, right now, that dialectic is the following of the logos, but as a deep trust in the logos, a trust that calls upon the other virtues as fundamental capacities.
Right. One more time, the beginning of it especially.
The proposal is that dialectic is the following of the logos.
Yes.
But as the deep trust or in deep trust
yes.
of the logos.
Yes.
a trust that calls upon the other virtues
Yes.
as fundamental capacities.
Okay, great. What's the question I have, what's mysterious to me is, so there's the following of the logos, right? And everything comes out of the following of the logos. You're the listener, right?
I am. Are you about to make a proposal? You're still anticipating.
He's still in the anticipation. Yeah.
Yeah. So the senses I get is, so far I get that it's about following the logos, right? And that there's something about when you come in contact with the logos in dialectic, that there's some kind of trust that seems participatory, embodied, and that we both experienced in that seems to be one of the ways that the logos actually speaks in that way, that affords the following. I think what I'm anticipating is there's something in dialectic that seems to already announce that there's some way that the logos speaks in the inclination to do dialectic at all. There's some way that it's present in some way that I'm interested in what that is, how I hear it. There's something like that. So I think I want to go into that. Okay. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious what you've heard so far. If you've heard anything. Nope. Okay. Got it. So I just want to talk this through a little bit. So when I think about dialectic, right? Dialectic is in using Heraclitus's metaphor symbols of the log, and the proposals being something like the log of a fire, right? And a log is, you could say, is well, it's literally stored light, right? But it's in a form, and that the dialectic, right, is, you can imagine, is the rubbing together or the interaction of the propositions or the logs, and at some point it lights. It's mysterious to me where the logos is in the log, right? And how dialectic actually does the rubbing. It actually allows the living logos to come alive, that we then catch and we trust and we go into it, because it seems that there's something about dialectic, and looking at the difference between dialectic and, say, dialogue, that possibility of dialogos, right, it catching on fire, seems to be present from the start in some way, right? And I want to know what that way that is present. Do we hear it? Is there something about the formality of making a proposal that already announces that the proposal is going to be, there's something more than itself, right, that is contained? And because there's some way that it seems like the dialectic is the following of precisely what the proposal doesn't say, right?
Dialectic is the following of what the proposal doesn't say.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that. Dialectic is the following of what the proposal doesn't say.
Yes.
Is that your proposal?
Sounds like it is. Yeah. Yes.
Dialectic is the following.
Mm-hmm.
Not, I'm getting this. I understand you not to mean it's the thing that comes after by the following, but it's the action of following.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In the way that it's after Socrates of following Socrates.
Yes.
Right.
Because otherwise there'd be no reason to engage.
Right.
Right. If the proposal basically like just said the logos, there'd be no reason to engage with it. There's something about the way that the proposal, I don't know, I want to say, holds the logos, but also points to or speaks to what it doesn't say, right? Which that there's a sense of more. So the proposition doesn't fully say the whole thing, right? Thus there's.
I just want to make sure I've got the proposal.
Mm-hmm.
Dialectic is the virtue of following what the proposal does not say.
Yes.
Is that
yes?
Is that a fair representation?
Yes.
Sorry for interrupting, but it was introduced a little indirectly, so I just wanted to make sure I got it.
Yes.
Okay, this is very interesting. Dialectic is the following of what the proposal doesn't say. Okay, so I get the sense when you say that you take the following of what the proposal doesn't say to be in the direction of what the proposal means, not wayward in some direction that is not meant.
Yes.
Right? So, for instance, let me just maybe give an example, right? If dialectic is following what the proposal doesn't say, if you were to make a proposal and I heard the proposal and the proposal provoked in me a memory that took me away from this conversation and threw me off into a completely different direction, I would be following what the proposal didn't say.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that's not the kind of following that you mean.
Yes.
So do you mean that the following of what the proposal doesn't say still has to tie itself to where the proposal is intended?
Yes. It's like the proposal points.
Oh. Okay.
To what is beyond the proposal. So you'd have to get triggered and then go towards the direction of the pointing, right? For it to be following it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So
just like right now.
So if this is
like what you're actually right now, like, so you're following the proposal.
Right.
Right.
Because you, when you made the proposal that dialectic follows a proposal that the proposal doesn't say, I had a sense of where the proposal was going, and I gave you an example of me following the letter of the proposal, but I knew intuitively that that's not where I was going.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you're saying that the instance of what just happened between us is actually an instance of the dialectic.
Yes.
Because I was tracking your meaning.
Yes.
By avoiding tracking the letter.
Yes.
Right.
But you, just like, however, the letter matters, right? So it's like, just like with a log, when the log catches fire, the fire on one level, it's transforming the log, but it's doing it precisely in the contours of the log.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
So that transformation, so following the log is really important.
Okay. So if the log is the proposal, in order for me to follow what the proposal doesn't say in the way that I would need to follow the proposal, the proposal would have to be made in such a way that it had a shape that was followable.
Yeah.
Can I put it that way?
Yes.
Right? The fire would have to be able to catch along the lines of the proposal so that it could burn through.
Yes.
In other words, it couldn't be wet wood.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It would have to be able to conduct.
Yes.
Okay. What is the difference between a proposal that I can follow so that it burns through and a proposal that I can't follow because it might not burn through? I have this sense like, I know there's a difference.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell you what that difference is.
Yeah.
What does that difference feel like?
The question is like, there's a proposal that we can follow through, right? That burns along the contours of the proposition or the log. And then what happens when the proposal doesn't burn through? Well, I think it's so interesting. It's like, we can hear that it doesn't, right? In some way. So there's something about, this is where it goes back to, would you read the proposal again?
Right. The original proposal is dialectic is the virtue of following of what the proposal does not say.
Yeah.
Then you added to it, the proposal points to what is beyond the proposal.
Yes.
And then you added to this, following the log while transforming the log is very important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So if I would imagine as you're following along and it doesn't say it, what are we in relationship to what, right? It's like there's something that tells us, it's like, it reminds me of what we were talking about yesterday with air, right? This part where, oh yeah, it doesn't, the proposal doesn't totally say it. In fact, it's saying everything that it isn't. That negative space, or that putting skin on the ghost, starts to happen. But I would say even in not being able to follow it, tells us that there's something not to follow. What is that thing to follow? That's what kind of comes up in answering your question.
Okay. Boy, oh boy. Okay. I'm going to try and say that back to you.
Okay,
Let's
great.
see if I got it.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So we start by saying the dialectic is following.
Do you need me to reread it, Chris?
Yes, please.
So dialectic is the virtue of following. Dialectic is the virtue of following what the proposal does not say. Do you need any of the other things?
No, I think I've got. Thank you. So dialectic is the virtue of following what the proposal doesn't say, but that the proposal points to.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's not just following what it doesn't say.
Yeah.
It's following what it doesn't say. So there's a negative proposal.
Yeah.
Right. There's something to be avoided.
Yes.
Right. So now there's a boundary. I get the sense like you need to somehow provide somewhere to avoid.
Yeah.
Right. So that I'm getting the sense that part of the dialectic is knowing where not to go.
Yeah.
And then knowing where not to go, then there's something else beside the knowing where not to go.
Yeah.
Right. And those two things, like I see them almost as lanes.
Yeah.
So dialectic is following what the proposal doesn't say. But there's not just a negative index there, right? There's a negative index, right? What it doesn't say, but what it, I almost get the sense of shapeliness of proposal is the thing that keeps coming to me, right? When I think of the way that a fire traces along the log, it is the shape of the log and its texture and its density and its properties.
Yes.
Shapeliness, figuration, geometry is what I think of, right?
Yes.
So it seems to me like when I hear what you're saying, of course, geometry, right, brings Plato back into the mix, and that just seems intuitively to be onto something. Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing you say is something like, it's not the measurement of the proposal, but it's something about the geometry of the proposal that determines where it points.
Yeah.
And that the shape of that proposal, actually, I think of the way that I'm imagining it coming to a point, right?
Yes.
Fingers pointing at the moon, right? Like that old expression.
Yes.
Right. Is that
Is
that in the area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it speaks beyond itself. Oh, more lights up.
Right.
Because it lit.
Right.
More lights up. And then there's more to propose that won't quite say it.
Right.
But points beyond it. And this is the following, and all the things that you just said about the virtues coming and the trust, I start to form with it and become shaped by it.
Right.
And we're following it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not, so there's a sort of a difference. There's like a relational difference that I'm hearing that wasn't clear before, right? Because, so we're following what it doesn't say, but it's not simply that we're following what it doesn't say, because we're actually, it's like, what it says is something that we could look at.
Yeah.
But where it points is something we have to travel through, right?
Yeah.
So we have to travel along the shape of the proposal to know where it points. We don't know where it points by hearing it.
Right.
We know where it points by actually traversing.
Yes.
Right? So there's something embodied and active that our relationship to the proposal in dialectic, that dialectic has something to do with the way that we interact with the proposal in a much more embodied manner.
Yes.
Something to pass through, not something to say.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Do you
feel like we've grasped this together properly?
I feel like we pointed beyond it.
We pointed
fully.
Beyond it?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to read it one more time?
Well, if I'm doing the full thing, I should give you both the proposal and its progression.
Please.
Right. So the original proposal was Dialectic is the virtue of following what the proposal does not say. Second major move, the proposal points to what is beyond proposal. And then the log came in as a metaphor. Following the log while transforming the log is very important. Being told what not to follow tells us what to follow. And then this came into, and I couldn't quite get like a literal statement, but I put in something like the geometry of the proposal and enacting it in some fashion.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. So I think what I think is coming up now, what I'm appreciating is that what seems to be gathering together is the idea that that whatever dialectic is and does isn't that the following of the logos is something that is that following the logos is not something that we train on just with our attention, but it's something that we have to pass through in our entirety, right? That the body of the individual actually travels through the dialectic. The dialectic isn't something that passes between us, but something that we pass through.
Yeah.
Or
totally.
maybe both at once.
You just
right?
described my whole relationship with Heidegger in my 20s.
Okay.
And don't forget also to listen to the Herald.
Yep. So I'll just finish the appreciation first. So what I'm appreciating is that our relationship to the dialectic, almost as though we had a subject-object relationship to the dialectic, and we were all subjects beholding the dialectic as the object. That's an imperfect analogy, but just sort of stay with me. And that what I'm now getting a sense of is that it's actually closer to the reverse, that we are had by the dialectic when the dialectic is actually taking effect. And that's what makes it participatory, right? It's not something that we have in hand, but we are had in its hand. And the way that we follow the contours of a proposal suggests that it is hosting us, not the other way around, when we're surrendering ourselves to it properly, right?
Yes.
And so, so before I anticipate, maybe I'll ask the Herald.
Yeah, I mean, what I noticed that really stood out for me is, Guy originally sort of leaning in, and you seemed very pensive, like trying to sort of get. So I had this image after it was named that Guy was really rubbing the logs together with you. And then there was these moments in which like you came in and you both sort of came alive, like you were really in the dialectic. And I imagined that caught fire, like the rubbing of the logs together. And those were those moments. But then there was a moment of like coming back and like a pause and like, again, like a contemplate, then a re-engagement. So I kept seeing throughout this sort of this vision, and that was very present, is this imagery of sort of these logs and the way in which they catch fire. And it seemed to be happening through your proposal and listening.
Wonderful.
Quite viscerally.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I'm anticipating is here, but yet to be said, is the relational stance that makes the dialectic possible, that makes the affecting of the dialectic possible, right? Because what we've been gathering together this more sort of theoretical, geometrical idea of what the dialectic is, right? What's the relationship between the dialect and the proposal, and the way the proposal is used, and the relationship between the proposal and the logos, right? The relation between the part that is the proposal to the whole that is the logos, and the sense that it has to bridge, and the sense that there's a continuity, but that continuity has to do with following the shapeliness of it and not the letter of its speech or semantic content. And I think that's charged. That's excellent. The thing that I anticipate that's missing, though, is that it seems, because of the way that we're actually trying to enact it, that the relational stance that we're all actually demonstrating or trying to is actually essential to bridging it, to hooking it, to catching it, right? The I-thou that we've been talking about so much in the last couple of dialogues has to be brought now into the proposal, right? It's not something that I'm just doing in isolation. It's something that we're doing, but where is that in the proposal? So we have to add it. Okay.
You're going to make your proposal?
Yes.
Okay, so we're switching roles. You're now the scribe, and you're now the herald.
Right.
So my proposal is that dialectic Dialectic is, I'm going to basically take what you've given me first, right? Dialectic is the following of a proposal. Following the proposal, what the proposal does not say, but points us to. Dialectic is the following of a proposal, not in what the proposal says, but in what the proposal points us to, such that that proposal becomes a thou to us, and we become a thou to it.
And just to be clear, that's the practice of dialectic, and the virtue is the ability to do that. I'm trying to get where the virtue is. So the virtue, let me make sure I understand you. So the virtue of dialectic is following the logos and following the geometrical contours of the space opened up by the proposal. But what you're adding is such that an I-thou relationship now comes to exist with the proposal. Have I understood you correctly?
You've understood me.
Right. And when you were doing it, you were doing this. What was happening there?
I think there's something about the relational contact. I think there's a couple things happening here.
Right.
One is that there's a gesture of invitation and gratitude.
Right.
That is suggestive of the relation we have to have with the proposal
So you're
itself.
enacting it.
Symbolically,
almost.
Right, as though you're the proposal.
Right.
Right. And I'm making sort of a gesture of thanks and invitation to
almost
you.
Almost namaste or something.
Yeah. Right, which is a gesture of coming to know you,
right?
Coming to understand you, coming to realize that I don't yet know you, but need to and want to, right? If you're the proposal, I don't yet know you, even though I've cast you out in front of me.
Right.
So there's that. And I think there's also this sense of contact, a kind of social contact, relational contact with the proposal.
So there's a contact this way, and then there's an initial contact, but a kind of like, not ignorance, but like almost like learned ignorance.
Yeah.
Like a sense of like, okay, contact, and there's contact. I'm trying to get at what's in the I-thouing.
You must do with the proposal what you do with a friend that you're coming to know.
Right.
That's why the proposal has to become a thou.
Okay, so you're doing this. So what's this? What's
repetition?
Repetition.
Repetition in the sense of repetition in the sense of gathering together and exceeding. Gathering together and exceeding. Gathering together and exceeding. That's the repetition.
So and that is adding to the virtue. How? Like, you've given me the mechanics. In what way is that more virtuous?
Because it's a reciprocal opening.
What
I've described.
You did that.
Open.
Yeah.
What I've described to you is a reciprocal opening, whereby the proposal. So when you come to know somebody, what begins to happen is that you're coming to know the person is also you're coming to know, in some sense, everything else as well. Right. That when you create a reciprocally opening I-thou relationship with someone, and their perspective becomes available to you as a means of contact with the world itself comes into, perhaps incrementally and maybe even imperceptibly, comes into clearer and clearer resolution, because you're using, not in a purely instrumental sense, but you now gain access to the world around you in the care of that person's reach that you didn't have a moment before. So as that person becomes more mysterious, and as your understanding of them exceeds the one that you had a moment before, more and more and more becomes available. Such is also true, I think, of the proposal in dialectic.
Great. I'm hearing the thou side of the I-thou, but you keep also drawing the circle close to your chest. So what's the I side of the I-thou in that transfiguration of the proposal into an thou? Because the I-thou are always like they reciprocally bound together. So how is the I changing when the proposal is thouing?
Well, the I becomes a thou to the proposal, right?
Okay,
it's a bidirectional relationship.
Okay. So what does that mean?
It means that as I deepen my understanding of the proposal is a reflective surface.
Right.
It means that I become known to myself in ways that I wasn't before, because the ways that the proposal is expanding in its width and its breadth is also casting my reflection in the same proportions. It means, like, as I reformulate the proposal and deepen it, I'm actually doing to myself what I'm doing to the proposal. In one sense, I thou is always spoken together.
Right. Okay, so I'm getting that. Can you now clarify how that's integrated by what you were saying with Guy about it's not so much we're doing the dialectic as it's doing us?
Because once that process begins, the emergence of what we called the Geist out of that process, right, which is the persona of the Logos as it faces us.
Right.
We come into its custody, into its carriage, right? Or maybe the best way to say it is we come into its hair, right? And so it becomes the governor of the process. And the virtue has something to do with giving oneself to the emergence of that process and opening to it as it opens.
So you did this, giving oneself to.
Yeah.
There's
sort of an implied sacrifice there, isn't there? Right?
Yeah.
Which
is that what was to you?
I think so. An offering up, right?
An offering
offertory.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And what's the nature of the offering?
What's the nature of the offering? I think the nature of the offering is we are willing to give up whatever we have at our disposal that we can either cling to as the idea of ourselves and the idea of what things are, or the law, like a law. So, I have an idea of, myself and what kind of a person I am, and I have an idea of what the world is, and I have an idea of what's real and what's not, and I have a metaphysics, and I have all my beliefs, and they're very important to me, and I can do one of two things with the ideas I have, right? I can understand them as being possessions of mine, as things that by virtue of holding them to my chest, I remain myself, or I can offer them as logs to the fire. Which is to say that when they burn through the process, I don't know what I'm going to be, right? It's like the aspirational, like a transformative experience that Ellie Paul talks about, right?
Exactly.
I don't know what I'm going to be in the fumes that are emitted by the burning of those ideas and beliefs. But I'm surrendering myself to the transformative experience, and I'm drawn to the belief that it's worthwhile by the process of the Logos itself, right? By following it.
And this sounds very, very far from dialogue.
Yeah. Most of them.
I think we could go on forever, but do you feel that
Yes.
Yes. And so I've understood you to bring in this added dimension, what everybody else has said, but there's this transfiguration of the proposal, and there's an I thou. The proposal becomes a thou, and then I become a thou in relationship to it, and that is an offering up of oneself and one's belief into the fire of the process. Have I understood you?
You have.
So here is, I'm going to do the appreciation, and then we'll stop there because anything else would take us back into the circle. First of all, I want to appreciate everything that everyone said, and then what I particularly appreciated about what you did, Chris, is I had not thought enough about the existential stance and how integral a role it plays in the virtue of dialectic. I think that was a gem, an absolute gem. And I really appreciate that. I'm very grateful, and I'm understanding the virtue and thereby the practice much better because of that. So I deeply appreciate that. And that's where we'll close here. What would happen, of course, is we'd get the report of the scribe and the herald. I would then go into anticipation, and then we would circle. But we're running out of time. And we're going to pick up on what we've given birth to about dialectic and the dialogos in the next episode, when we talk about why is it that so many people in so many places are generating these communities of these kinds of practice and seeking the cultivation of these kinds of virtue. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention.
It seems to me that the choice that Plato made was to create a form of recorded dialogue, a form of record that could undermine itself.
Yes.
And in undermining itself, could create from itself a process that people could participate in and symbolically work through.